How's it going, Gon here? Imagine buying the same game multiple times. I may have won the lottery. I'm a simple man, I want to play the same game over and over again on different systems. Be it on PC, Switch, PS2, PSP, Mega Drive, just every console. Except the GBA, I don't see myself buying the same game for the 14th time on the GBA. Now open your wings, you can do it. Get up, get up, get up, get up, get up to the top of the world. Well, that is depressing. Video game re-releases practically exist since the very beginning. The concept of taking a previous title from an older console and port it to the newest hardware is a neat idea. It might not be everyone's cup of tea, but when a good re-release comes out, it's always a good feeling. But not The Last of Us. Don't tell me these look different. The PS5 version is more of a re-release than a remaster. But now, let's go back to a time where Nintendo released a series of classic re-releases for the Game Boy Advance. The year was 2001, one of the weirdest years of all time. The year where we got Kinder Joy. I sure love some Kinder Joy. But least importantly, we had the GameCube and GBA released in Japan. And in December of that same year, Nintendo launched the Game Boy e-reader for Game Boy Advance. The e-reader served as an accessory to scan cards that you would generally find at game stores, to receive some extra content and items in games, or sometimes full-ass games. And that's where we got a ton of NES games on little cards. It was a good reward for the poor people who bought an e-reader. Some games like Metroid Prime and Animal Crossing on the GameCube had NES games playable in-game, but that was lame. We wanted the games portably, even if they were 20 years old at this point. Since Nintendo is not dumb, they released something called Classic NES Series for the Game Boy Advance in 2004. Through the course of 1 year, from 2004 to 2005, Nintendo released 12 games from the NES, and these include Donkey Kong, Dr. Mario, Excitebike, Ice Climber, Metroid, god I love that game, Zelda 1, Zelda 2 Adventure of Link, and Super Mario Bros. And the other 4 were third-party games like Bomberman, Castlevania, Pac-Man, and Xevious. These look cool. The boxes were clearly inspired on the black box template used on the NES, and the cartridges were a lighter grey, the same tone as the NES cartridges. With the release of the games, Nintendo also released a special edition for the GBA based on the NES and Famicom. And these look very cool, especially the NES one. It mixes the controller and console design of the NES, and it fits. Later we also got the Famicom Special Edition for the Game Boy Micro this time, and this one clearly takes the cake. One of the best looking micros out there. The classic NES series was one of the most successful series during the GBA's lifespan, but do these 20-year-old games hold up and look better on the GBA than the NES? Super Mario Bros. Is a pretty simple game, just make your way through the level and raise the flagpole in the end. So for the Game Boy Advance port, the game was stretched to fit the whole screen and they removed some pixels to make the thing work, which resulted in this. Not to mention the audio was compressed for the console and it sounds like you would expect. Overall, it's a solid port of Super Mario Bros, but for the Game Boy Advance, I would recommend Super Mario Bros. Deluxe, which has some extra content and the entirety of the lost levels. Donkey Kong received a fine port on the GBA, ignoring the sprite crunch and wonkiness. It's classic Donkey Kong, nothing more, nothing less. Pac-Man on the NES is not a good version of Pac-Man, and the GBA version is not much better. Look at these sprites, man, they're clipping through the maze. If you want to play Pac-Man, there's tons of versions that have come out in recent years, but avoid this one at all cost. I didn't play it, but I found this old IGN gameplay video of it, full of bot comments talking about the game way better than Pac-Man? A game better than the 54's best game of all time? Which one of the 53 is it? Oh, so it's an inferior bootleg called Pac Hero. Good god. Dr. Mario is a series I rarely talk about. A puzzle game featuring Mario as a doctor is certainly one of the things of all time. Anyways, I've played the NES and N64 entries, and this re-release is just the NES version, but portable. Same with most of these, like Excitebike and Xevious. Good games, but exactly the same as the original. No changes whatsoever. Zelda 1 and Link's Adventure are such a great addition to this series. Unlike Super Mario Bros, we never got a port of Zelda 1 on the Game Boy, and that game is such a perfect fit for a portable console, so this was a long time coming. Sometimes the sprites look silly during the gameplay, but a good way to play Zelda 1 and 2. Bomberman was also a part of the classic NES series, and it's the same as the original, except they removed multiplayer mode, which doesn't make any sense. The Game Boy Advance had multiplayer games, why couldn't this one? Well, at least we had Bomberman Tournament for the multiplayer, but still. It actually surprises me that they picked Ice Climber of all games for the classic NES series. This was mostly added because of Ice Climber's addition to Super Smash Bros. Melee, because who the hell thinks of Ice Climber as one of the 12 games to represent the NES? It's a great game, but an odd inclusion of an arguably small series of re-releases. I'm gonna say it, Metroid was a pointless addition for this series. Metroid 1 is my all-time favorite NES game, but we already had Metroid Zero Mission, a remake of the original Metroid on the Game Boy Advance. But if you really wanted to play the original, the full game was unlockable in Metroid Prime on the GameCube, so it didn't lack any modern re-release. Great game, but I don't see any reason why you wouldn't pick the remake. The 12th and final game from the classic NES series was Castlevania. Castlevania is another one where I'm genuinely surprised that Nintendo picked to re-release, but I'm glad they did. If they didn't, we would probably get Top Gun instead. Overall, pretty good lineup, but damn, Japan got more games. In Japan, they received 18 more games than the rest of the world. Adventure Island, Balloon Fight, Clu Clu Land, Dig Dug, which would have been great if it released internationally. Famicom Detective Club 1 and 2, Gambare Goemon, Mappy, the original Mario Bros, SD Gundam World, Shin Onigashima, Star Soldier, Super Mario Bros. 2 The Lost Levels, The Mysterious Murasame Castle, Twinbee, and Wrecking Crew. I never played majority of these games, but I have to ask, why didn't Nintendo port Balloon Fight, Clu Clu Land, Dig Dug, Wrecking Crew, and Twinbee? I think these would have been perfect additions to one of the best series of the Game Boy Advance. Have you looked at the boxes they got in Japan? These look so cool. They're exact replicas of the original Famicom boxes, and they're a bit smaller this time. Excellent series of boxes to collect if you love wasting space. The classic NES series was no doubt one of the coolest things Nintendo had ever done. You have to keep in mind this was before Virtual Console and the Wii. So the fact that we could buy only the games we wanted instead of a retro compilation on the Game Boy Advance was sweet. Except it was $20 for game? Yeah, you f***ed up, Nintendo. But don't take my word for it, just listen to all the classic NES series fans everywhere. Where's classic NES series 2 on Nintendo Switch, Nintendo? We are starving!